Hello, welcome to Sabbath School U. Today we're talking about last day events, and I have some guests with me. I have Tanya here. Hi. I have Rich, hello, and I have Gina.
Hey.
And Gina's going to go ahead and pray for us, and then Rich is going to read our first Bible verse.
Okay, I'll pray in Spanish. Querido Padre Celestial que estás en los cielos, gracias por darnos la oportunidad de venir hoy a estudiar tu palabra. Gracias por todo lo que tú nos das y estas lecciones para poder estudiar y conocerte a ti un poco más. Cuídanos hoy y esté con la discusión que vamos a tener. En nombre de Jesús, amén.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Gina. And Rich, if you could read the verse, Matthew 23:12 for us.
No problem.
I really want to go in on that.
Okay. Well, let's dive in. Matthew 23, verse 12. And whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted.
Okay. So I think we all understand the concept there. Mm-hmm. What does that have to do with last day events? Did anybody else open this lesson and was immediately confused? Because I was like, I expected it to be, and the moon and the stars will fall and all that jazz. What does one thing have to do with the other, would you say?
Maybe it speaks of the kind of character, two characters that might be discernible in the last days. Those who are clearly exalting themselves and those who are taking the road of humility. Maybe.
I agree with that. It has a lot to do with the type of character that we should be having in terms of preparation for those last day events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bouncing off of them too. I agree. How's your relationship with God? And, are you also working on yourself, with all the last day events that will be coming up? So.
Because it's kind of, Matthew 23 and 24 on a whole are specifically about the end of the world because the disciples asked, they want to know. And Jesus is like, all right, you know what? We're going to sit down. I'm going to debrief you.
Sure.
And this verse is smack in the middle of all of that. Mm-hmm. And so for me, and then the lesson moves into the second day. The title of it, the subtitle is Blind Guides.
Right. I think one of the things, just in terms of, you mentioned the placement of this text in the two chapters, 23 and 24, it's interesting, before we get to 24, and Jesus talks about kind of the external surrounding events that will characterize the times right before it's coming, he really deals with the heart of the believer. Someone who either professes to follow him, but there's kind of incongruence between your profession and your practice, versus the kind of character that he's really looking for. And so for me, as I think of last day events, which is a term that I was kind of afraid of growing up, I've come to learn it also embraces the idea of the person that you are, and not just, like you said, the sun, the moon, the stars falling. Those things can happen, but if my heart isn't where it needs to be, then I won't be prepared.
So the events themselves are secondary to the condition of our hearts when the world ends. Mm-hmm. Speaking of childhood, what memories do you have of learning about the end of the world?
Okay,
was that the message that you got?
Okay. So for me, every time that I thought of last day events, I would kind of tie that in with persecution. And so for me, it was like my main point. I would have this backpack ready, and like I would pack it with all the stuff that I would need to have for when persecution came. And like I was always prepared. I was like, okay, well, we're gonna have to run. Like we're gonna have to just get up and go, move to the mountains, and this total survival mode. So that was my thought. I'm gonna have my Bible. I'm gonna have my all the things some water. Make sure that I'm ready to go.
Right.
I was like literal hardcore. This is a persecution. Let's get to it.
That's true. That's the same thing growing up. Even my younger sister to this day is like, you better be prepared and make sure we have the food and know which hills to run to and the mountains. And so, yeah, as a child growing up, I would agree. That's the only thing I always thought of, like persecution. And
why is it?
It would scare me as a child.
Why is it funny now? Why is it funny now?
Funny in terms of as a child, for me to think back and say, wow, for me, so I kind of didn't really see the point to that. I just kind of went to how will it affect me literally in that moment.
Right.
So I need to be prepared and I need to do this. And I think there were times where I'd be like, well, what happens when my MP3 player dies? Where am I going to charge it? Stuff like that. And so for me, I think that's funny because it's like, wow, I'm kind of missing the point. Wow. I'm not really grasping what exactly it means to be persecuted, to experience those last day events.
Yeah, this is one vivid memory that stands out in my mind. Whoever the speaker was that day was talking about last day events, and this line is just etched in my memory. He was like, one day they're gonna come in while we're having church, and they're gonna arrest us, and they're gonna chain the doors closed. And as a little kid, I'm just like, oh man. You know, and for the next maybe 3 or 4 Sabbaths, I'm just like, is this the day where they come in and chain the doors of the church closed or whatnot? And so as Gina said, looking back, it is kind of humorous. Was anybody Pathfinders growing up? Pathfinders? No? Okay, I wasn't. And that was another thing that kind of said, man, I'm just not going to be prepared because
For the end.
for the end, I don't know how to
can't
tie
tie
a
my
knot.
knots. Yeah.
I don't know how to start a fire. You know, I just need food from scratch.
Grow
I don't know what
garden.
flowers are poison ivy versus what's edible. You know, all that kind of stuff. And you know, it's kind of humorous again, not because the content is all of a sudden humorous or nothing worth taking seriously, but just looking at those kind of, you know, early elementary perspectives on it. It's a little bit humorous, and yeah.
So then what, because I like your point about Matthew 23 being about the condition of the heart, and then 24, the specific events.
Sure.
But then what can we learn from what Jesus was saying in Matthew, on a whole, in Matthew 23? Like, what can we take away for ourselves? Because he had a specific audience, and he was saying it at a specific time.
And I think he also mentioned to be careful of false prophets, because we can also be caught up in that, you know, people who claim to know God and they know when the second coming will be, and, you know, I think things like that are part of the last day events. I don't know if that is.
You know, speaking of
something
character and just maybe play on words here, Pathfinders is an organization in our church, as we all know, and you know, their present work and preparation is linked to the last days, at least in theory. And I think the second or first day of this lesson is called Blind Guides. So, you know, you guys think you're Pathfinders, but let me tell you what, you know, you're blind guides. Now, there weren't Pathfinders then, but his point is you are the ones who present yourselves as knowing it all, being it all, having it all, possessing it all. And what I'm saying is, if those who are going to follow you, the destination isn't what you think it would be.
You're not going to end up where you think you're going.
And so, you know, that for me is immediately relevant for our day and age. To really, I think he's kind of appealing for us not to be so maybe consumed with being right that you lose out on having the right relationship with him. You know?
Because I'm just skimming through 23 now, and I see a lot of like starting in verse. Actually, we can just start from the beginning. Matthew 23, verse 1. He said to his disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat." Verse 2, and then verse 3. "Therefore, whatever they tell you, observe, but do not do according to their works." Basically, follow what they say, but not how they act.
Wow.
And it's like, so what are they saying? They're saying knowledge.
Yeah.
And they have knowledge and they don't apply it. So it's really interesting to me. And then the rest of 23, he talks about, it's a lot of woe. Woe to you, Pharisees, woe to you, hypocrites. And it says, one of the verses says, you won't enter the kingdom and you won't let anybody else in. It's like really, for me, really strong language. Whereas people are so scared of chapter 24. But for me, 23 is even more like, that hurts. It hurts a lot because it's, to me, a person who is strayed so far from God that they're following him in action but not in the heart. Yeah. That's a lot more scary to me than natural disasters.
And I think that maybe you're having that reaction because 24, yeah, all these things are listed. These are things that I have no control over. They're going to happen and they're going to happen. 23, that's where you are held accountable. You are going to be answering and kind of judged, I guess, yeah. But you have to answer for all of those things, all of those character traits that I guess are important to be able to get you through 24. That's what you're responsible for. So for most people, maybe, you know, oh, natural disaster will kill me. Well, let's get down to it and take it a step back. Let's see what it is that he says that I need to be like in order to make it through those kinds of things. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, those natural disasters won't really be able to do anything to you. I know in Matthew, I think 24:13, it says, he who endures to the end shall be saved. So it's like we have that promise and we have that hope that, yeah, a whole bunch of stuff is going to happen, but there are those who will be saved in the end.
Sure.
And I like what verse 28 of chapter 23 says, how, you know, people will speak like they're righteous, but inside they're hypocrites. And I know that's such a huge thing that we have in our churches or any other denomination. You know, we act like, oh, we follow the Bible, we do everything right. But in our hearts, we just are evil, malicious, and we don't treat each other right. And, you know, all this judgment. And I think things like that, if we can, you know, get to a point where, you know, not so hypocritical.
Yeah. I don't know about you. Sometimes I try to place myself in the shoes of these Pharisees. I mean, they're just getting blasted.
Yeah.
You know, just Jesus is on a different level right now. And these are very strong metaphors. And if I'm in the crowd, these aren't, you know, sidewalk criminals. They're
Those are the higher
pastors,
status
you know,
of society.
preachers. They are,
Yeah.
you know, they for
Leaders.
yeah, they're on the PTA board, they're on the
Yeah.
institution board of directors, you know, they sit on the stage during alumni weekends, all that kind of stuff. And Jesus just is going to town. And you begin to wonder, Mrs. White describing this actually suggests in the book Steps to Christ that, you know, he was saying this through trembling lips. Like when I read it, I think he's just like, rah, rah, rah. But it's like, it was a different kind of seriousness, the kind of seriousness that your parents might, you know, depict when they're really disappointed. Like tears are coming down their eyes. Still heavy language to say with tearful tones. But I don't know, when I'm looking at it like that, I'm saying, okay, if Jesus spoke to me like this, confronting stuff in my life, what would my response be?
Right.
Would I be like, yo, dude, you should have sent an email? Or would I be like, man, this is love, that you'd be willing to put me on Front Street, call me out for the sake of 24.
Right.
He's like, listen, 24 is going to happen, like you said, whether you like it or not. But I need you to get 23 clear in your mind.
If 23 is good, you'll get through 24.
You'll get through 24.
And you're going to get through to the end,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
When is the end? When is Jesus coming? When,
And that's
when,
when we
when,
get to the
when,
point where
when?
it's like, you just have to be ready, which is scary.
Tuesday the 29th, carry the one. We don't know. We don't know.
Why do we try to know?
Security, comfort.
It's
Or
in our
maybe you want to
nature.
continue to do what you're doing and feel like, okay, if I know when it is, maybe I can still do a few things of the world and,
Yeah.
you know, and then
Well,
maybe
that
when I'm
one.
ready, you know, then I can, you know. But I think it's good that we don't know.
It's
when
interesting because if you apply it to school, like when you're going to take a test, you know when the test date is.
So you can
you'll go in your
procrastinate.
calendar and you'll be like, all right, well, it's this day, so
Yeah.
it's like at least 3 more weeks. And then it's the night before the test and you're like trying to study.
Praying every prayer.
A pop quiz, on the other hand, well, that is a more accurate gauge of whether or not you are prepared.
Sure.
Are you studying every night, you know, accumulating that knowledge, or are you cramming the night before?
Yeah.
And that only happens because you know the date. You know when that test is going to be, so you know that you have that extra time to bide.
Yeah. It's the truth. And there's a reason I believe, that's a perfect example, wow, you know, why he doesn't tell us, because I think he knows us. Like, we do very well at saying, okay, Jesus is coming 2022.
We'll say, let me get all this other.
You know, let me get all this stuff out the way. And it's so deep because this message is lodged between 2 unknown realities. We don't know when he's going to come, and we don't know if we'll be alive when he comes. So sometimes we really bank on, man, if I just had the date of his coming, then I could just do what I want. But it's like, well, even if you knew, let's just say hypothetically, theoretically, he did say in Scripture, this is when I'm coming. You know, there's no guarantee that we'd be alive or around, you know. And so if for whatever reason he were to send right now the date of his coming, for some that would be like, oh, great, he's coming in 3 years, bet. But if it were 300 years from now, I think we'd all be like, oh man, like, I'm not gonna be here, you know what I mean? So even if he did, he was like, you know, it's just best that no one knows, but everyone can be prepared.
Isn't there a verse, help me, isn't there a verse that says, pretty much when you die, that's when the second coming, like, that's it. The second coming is whenever you die. Not necessarily
because
the next thing you're going to see
it's the next
when
thing
you
that
open
you see and
it.
you
see what
don't
I'm
realize
saying?
Yeah.
the time going by.
So are we saying that it kind of doesn't matter when he's coming?
What do you mean by it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter what date it happens to be. It doesn't matter if it's 5 days from now or 5 years from now or 5 centuries from now.
Well, maybe
Does
I
it
can,
matter or not?
It does matter. I mean,
and
it's just
it
still,
matters. I think that it matters in terms of the actual happening of it. But you're talking about knowing the time?
Yeah, not that it matters if it happens.
Okay.
Does it matter when? This when question. When people ask me when, I kind of just want to tell them when you die. Like, it doesn't matter. This whole mystery, people are so focused on the mystery
Right.
that they're missing the point of actually getting ready.
So is that maybe that's the focus of what Jesus is saying? It's like you can be so date oriented that you miss, again, 23. You miss the heart orientation, which is, if I told you, it might not have the kind of bearing on your life that you think knowing would have. I mean, perfect school illustration again. Being prepared for school isn't just being prepared for the tests you know are coming, but you know really how prepared you are when that pop quiz comes. The biblical illustration is, if you knew a thief was coming to your house, you wouldn't leave your doors unlocked, stuff all accessible, you'd hide your jewels. But you don't know when the thief is coming. So still
Always
secure your
prepared.
house,
That's a
still
good
make
point.
sure you hide. You know what I mean? It's not enough just to do the heightened preparation based on what you know, but the true maturation comes when it's like, I don't know when, but I'm going to stay ready.
Okay.
I think you're right. I was just thinking about it. I don't think it matters when it happens. Like, the point of the matter is that it's going to happen. I think a lot of people do get hung up on the whole idea of persecution and 24 and, the natural disasters and the false prophets and this and that, thinking, oh man, we're going to experience this. We need to be ready for that.
Wow.
I think, no, you need to be ready for more than that. And so you shouldn't be so hung up on the actual last day events. You should be more hung up on what they represent and how what you're doing to be ready for them. So some people may not even go through the last day events. That's what I mean. So the people that have already died, to them, it's irrelevant if they're experiencing those chapter 24 prophecies and things that are going to happen, because they're already dead. All they're going to witness is that second coming. So for them, for the people that have passed, it's really just 23 that they should have paid it, or I guess in their lives we're paying attention to.
So you can have a last day character even without experiencing last day
Correct.
events.
Exactly.
You need a last day character. You need the last day character.
Or whatever you
And
die.
regardless
So
if you
then what we're
experience
getting
the
ready
event.
for is not the last day. We're
Correct.
getting ready for the coming. We're
Correct.
getting ready for the person,
Wow.
not for survive. Because that's
The backpack with all
I
the
think some
survival
people are
kits.
so
Pathfinders.
nervous and scared. They want the second coming because they want to know if they'll avoid the last, persecution. That's what I think also why people always like, when is Jesus coming? I don't want to have to deal with being arrested and going through all that,
the Sunday
Trump.
law.
Yeah,
and
so
all
I
that
think
other
maybe that
stuff.
could be another reason why people always like, oh, I hope he comes now. And
Yeah.
they get so caught up in that they want to know, like,
No,
is
and that's the
you know?
reason why I brought it up, because it worries me when I see so much fear and anxiety when the Bible says the person who fears is not made perfect in love, and God is love. So then it's like, what exactly are we telling people they need to be prepared for? The church of the body of Christ. We're sending the wrong message a lot of the times, because I've even seen video series and seminars and all these like book series, and it's like what you need to know to survive. And it's like, is that what we're trying to do? Survive the end? Or are we trying to be ready to go home?
Yeah. And I think it's an admixture. Growing up in Florida, we knew seasonally hurricanes were going to come. It wasn't a matter of if, it was just when. You didn't always know the exact date or time. Meteorologists would do their best to forecast the strength or whatnot. And as a Floridian, you kind of, it's par for the course. So around this time, go to the store, get a bunch of water, cover your flowers, your crops, if you're a farmer, board your windows, et cetera, et cetera. But all of these things were a means to an end. And knowing that it was going to come, even the specifics, kind of motivated you to some end. But the goal wasn't just to board the windows. The goal wasn't just to get a whole bunch of water. The goal was to weather the storm, to endure until it was completed.
Over.
There was something beyond the kinds of preparatory advice that came. And I think this is what, sometimes can happen. Jesus says, in response to a question, how's it going to be? Okay, here's how it's going to be. Here's some stuff. But it's really very broad what he says. This is what's going to happen. People are going to come in my name saying that they're me. Be careful about those things. You don't know when it's going to happen. Very broad strokes. But his point is, listen, it's going to get so bad, guys, that you're going to feel like giving up. Love of many is going to grow cold, et cetera, et cetera. But this is what I want you to focus on. And then he goes into 25 and, other parables that we know, the parable of the virgins, et cetera, which is when you have a relationship with me, that really becomes your anchor through the storms that will come. Now, if you try to face these things without me, they will, not if, they're that strong that they'll deceive even the elect. But those who are lost in me, caught up with me, then I think that's how you weather the storm.
But so if we don't know, if there's no way to know when he's coming, how do we know when we're ready?
That's a great question.
Like, can you stand up right now and raise your hand and say, I am ready? I'm ready. I know I'm ready. I'm confident that I'm
but
ready.
we know what it takes to be ready.
And because of God's grace, I think we can get to a point where we feel okay.
I feel like,
And if whatever happens, then,
yeah,
we'll
like
be
we
ready.
have,
'Cause I know there's no way you can be perfectly,
we have the goal. Like we have, I guess, so we have the warning, which is these are the last day events. But we also have instruction saying, well, if you want to be able to, if you weather the storm, and if the whole getting to heaven idea, you need to have a Christ-like character. That is our goal. Yes, it is achievable here on earth, but with his help. So once you have that Christ-like character, it doesn't have to be here on earth, but once you've achieved that perfect character that's Christ-like, that is when you are quote unquote ready. And then I feel some of the people get a little bit, I guess, nervous. Well, am I going to get to heaven? Well, am I going to do this? I'm not perfect now. I know I'm not. Nobody is. But it's with like that constant relationship with God that we try and adopt his teachings. We try and put into practice his examples that he gave us to be more Christ-like and be ready. That is, I think, our goal in terms of what we're trying to work for.
And I think there's a biblical example of one who knew in his heart of hearts, he could raise his hand and stand up and say, for sure, not looking into himself. I'd like to read it. It's in 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 12. And then I'll go over to 2 Timothy chapter 4. So this is Paul, and he's talking to his mentee. In 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 12, he says, "For this reason I also suffer these things. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed, for I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep what I have committed to him until that day." And then in chapter 4, verses 6 through 8, "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing." So Paul seems to be hinting at this idea.
Very confident.
Very clear, very confident,
Like, I know
not
who I
mincing
am.
words.
I
I
know where I'm
know the
going.
one that I've trusted my life to. I know that he's able to keep me. I'm about to die before his coming, but I'm good. And I know that there's a crown with my name on it. And he's not selfish saying, and anybody who's looking forward to his appearing can have this confidence right now. So I do believe that we are all able in Christ to say, my hand's raised, I'm standing up, I'm ready. Whichever comes first, my death or his coming.
That's a good point.
And
I
he
think
would-
that's what we all need. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Go ahead.
And I was just going to say real quick, I think that's also what a lot of us lack. Even me, I don't have that confidence. I feel like I'll never be ready. But then you realize because of God's grace, and he sees that you're doing your best to be a better person.
Sure.
And when that time comes, or if you die, at least you did the best you could to have a better relationship with God and do what you could to have that Christ-like
It's
character.
his call. It's not up to
so-
us to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah, so
and
do the
decide.
best you can, and be confident, and just like.
What were you going to say, Gina?
And I think that, I'm sorry. So with him, he wasn't nervous and he wasn't, constantly thinking about that. And kind of like with you or with us when we take our tests and we're like, oh gosh, the test is tomorrow and it's going to be this and I'm nervous and I'm scared. And no, because if you were prepared and you've studied and you've done what's expected of you, you have that calm and you're like, okay, let's take the test. Bring it on. I'm not worried. And the way that he's being so confident, it kind of shows, or I guess. Makes it apparent that he wasn't nervous. He wasn't worried about, the earthquakes and this, because he knew he was ready. Like he was he was done.
Yeah.
That's a great
And
example.
he had a very, no, go ahead.
That's a great example, yeah.
No, I was going to say, he had a very clear self-understanding. You know, he often almost self-depreciates himself. I mean, he says in a very strong way, I'm the worst of sinners. You know, but hey, God's grace is made for people like me. So I don't think Paul is being haughty or arrogant, you know, overestimating himself. He's saying, really, when I look at how grace works, this is what gives me confidence. His grace is sufficient for me. Therefore, I can say, hey, I will be ready when he comes.
What does it mean? He is able to keep what I have committed to him. What do you think that means?
I think of it as, to use a modern, you know, he might be using financial institution language. The banks were not what they are now. They weren't that then. But, you know, as you can imagine, they didn't have a system of checks and balances that were as advanced as we do now. So sometimes your funds could get lost, you know, if you didn't trust in somebody else.
Really?
Where's my money? I'm sorry, you know.
We just don't have it.
We just don't have it, you know, and it's not like, you know, but he's like, but Christ will always have a record of me. And when I put things and invest in him, my life meaning, he's not going to lose track. And he who begun a good work in me will finish it until the day, Philippians 1:6. So I think that's kind of what he's getting at there.
And we're not saved by works,
Yeah.
you know. Thank God for that.
He
Because
keeps
if
track
that
of
was
me.
the point,
I
then
can't account for myself.
I'd be very nervous about the last
then
day
you'd have
events.
to
and-
keep track of that.
Exactly. So
Am I ready?
Praise God
Right,
for
that's a good one.
Have I
saved
done
by
enough
grace.
works?
Yeah. So
Interesting.
yeah.
And then it's more of a chore. You're not
Yeah.
doing it because you want to.
So a better question might be, are you invested?
Wow. Yes,
Are you
ma'am.
That's
committed?
true.
Right?
Yes.
I'm excited now. I have a positive feeling
I feel a lot more better. This was good.
about Christ's second coming. Well, guys, I want to thank you so much for this discussion. I really feel good about it. I thank you for just being always ready with the Bible verses and your memories and wanting to share with everybody. We thank you also for joining us. If you would like to have more information, you can go to www.sabbathschoolu.org. That's www.sabbathschool.org. Thanks. We'll see you next time.